Hello and welcome to Scotty Kilmer Car Talk, where I use my 50 years experience of working on cars to answer all your car questions. You notice you don't see a hat with names advertising. I'm sponsored by no one except the truth. Not often you can get all this free advice from a guy like me who knows what he's talking about. So ask your questions on the live chat and I will pick the best ones. The first question is Michael Martin. Hey Scotty, is a brake fluid flush necessary at 60,000 miles for a Nissan Altima? Now that's a good question. What you have to understand is brake fluid is what's called hygroscopic. It absorbs water vapor. Now, the systems in any brake system are not totally sealed. They have a little bit of air to get in so the fluid can go up and down. So there's always some water vapor being absorbed into the brake fluid that degrades it. Now, if you're the type of guy that keeps your car forever, I would change it every 60,000 miles. But if you don't, I'll give you an example. I had a customer with a Nissan. It was 12 years old. He'd never touched the brake fluid, and it still worked perfectly fine. It didn't leak anywhere. It stopped. It's over a very, very long period of time that the water vapor is going to bother the system. Now, the Japanese cars are a little tighter built than, say, the American cars. So if you have an American car, I would definitely change the brake fluid out every 6 or 8 years or so if you're going to keep your car forever, because it's going to last longer that way. But if you're the type of guy that gets rid of your car when you get over 100,000 miles or so, you don't have to do anything to it, really, if you want the truth. Next question. Minnesota's Kanata says, Scotty, love the show. My wife wants an all-wheel drive for winter driving. What do you recommend? Okay, you can't beat the Toyotas. They last the longest. They go forever. Now, if you want to get something that costs a little bit less, get a Subaru. Their all-wheel drives are good vehicles. You know, they've made all-wheel drive vehicles for a really long time. If she can drive a standard, get a standard. If not, you get an automatic. They won't last as long. But if she has to drive an automatic and has to get all-wheel drive, get either a Toyota or a Lexus. If she wants a little bit fancier, you're going to pay a little bit more for it. And with the snow you guys get up there in Minnesota, that's probably not a bad idea to get one of those all-wheel drive vehicles for driving in the snow so you don't get stuck anywhere. I mean, they do work better in the snow. There's no arguing it. Here down in Texas, hardly ever snows in southern Texas. So kind of a waste of money getting an all-wheel drive car. Next question. Trumpet Guy 723 says, Scotty, I got a 2011 Jeep Liberty. Replaced the heater core 3 years ago. Last winter started to blow heat on the passenger side, not on the driver's side. Heater core issue or something else? Well, if it's low on coolant and there's air in it, it can do that. But also realize that if that Jeep has dual climate control, there's an actuator for heat on the right side, and there's an actuator for heat on the left side. And a lot of times, the actuator for heat on the left side goes bad. So in that case, you got to get a guy like me who has a dealer level scan tool. And then we can activate the actuator on the right side, on the left side, and do testing. Because taking that dash apart is a very expensive endeavor. And you don't want to just guess. You want to have a guy who can get a bidirectional scan tool and can actuate both sides and see that, oh, okay, the left side's not actuating, so we got to take that apart and fix it. You don't want to guess with stuff like that because it's very expensive. But with a bidirectional scan tool, you can actually analyze all that stuff and fix it correctly. Next question. Jose Duran says, Scotty, I got a Honda Odyssey 07. Has a grinding noise while in low gears, 45 to 60. The transmission got rebuilt and still have the sign. Please help. Thank you. Okay, you want a parade that is wheel bearings that are doing it. But from my experience, it's still in the transmission. Those horrible automatic transmissions. I had some of my customers get free ones from Honda because they had kind of a secret recall on that. Guys say they rebuild those things. A lot of times they don't fix them right. In order to rebuild those, they were designed wrong. You would have to change every stinking bearing inside the transmission. And when guys rebuild them, they usually don't do that because it costs too much money for the parts. I would kind of figure the guy did a crappy job. Take it to another transmission shop and see what they say. Most give free estimates. And if they say it's inside and that's where the problem's coming from, take it back to the guys that rebuild it and say you did a crappy job. Either give me my money back or fix it right. Because I see that all the time. I was reading the other day something like 33%. 1 out of 3 transmission rebuilds done in the United States these days are done incorrectly the first time. So a lot of times you're better getting a factory rebuilt than having a guy at a shop rebuilding it. Next question. Charles Black says, I'm an Uber driver. I've been driving a lot. If people have the Fiat car dealership, have their Fiats and Jeeps fixed for catastrophic electrical problems, have you heard and experienced this? Yeah, I sure have. I mean, years ago, Fiat pulled out of the United States. Now they're back because they bought Chrysler. And when all us mechanics were called Fiats, we'd say, fix it again, Natone, because they were always breaking. And even back then, it was electrical problems. And it's the same thing today. They haven't fixed all that stuff. And I would not buy one. If you bought one and you're stuck with it, you might as well as drive it, because if you buy a late model one and then you sell it when it's 2 or 3 years old, you'll lose so much money, you'll be mad. You might as well drive the thing. But don't ever buy another one. If you're a serious Uber driver, get a Toyota. They run the longest with the least repairs. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You would not want a Chrysler or a Fiat product if you're driving Uber and putting a lot of miles on, because something's going to go wrong from my experience with them. Next question. Adam Rod 47 says, the brakes on my truck tend to stick after I drive for a while. Could the brake hoses be collapsing on the inside? It's been doing it a while. Or is it when it's really hot outside? Okay. That's the simplest, easiest thing to try. Heck, just buy the brake hoses. They cost little. You can put them on yourself, bleed the air out. I got videos to show you how to do it. It's not that big of a deal. Pray it's that, because if it isn't, there are so many things that can go wrong. The brake booster could be dragging. They cost a lot of money. The brake master cylinder could be dragging. They cost a lot of money. Or the calipers could be sticking, and as they heat up, they drag. Now, the calipers themselves, these days, it's not that big of a deal. Getting rebuilt ones. Places like AutoZone, they sell rebuilt ones for a fraction of the cost of the new ones. And basically, they're just metal parts with pistons with rubber seals on them. They're not that hard to rebuild. So I use rebuilt ones all the time, and I never have any problems with them. So you could change that yourself, too, if you think they were sticking. But try the hoses first. That's the cheapest, easiest thing to do. A lot of times, it'll fix your problems. Next question. Sonny Goussain says, Scotty, what do you think about braking without using the clutch in a standard transmission car? Okay, if you're talking about put it in neutral and then brake, you're going to take less strain on the engine, on the transmission, on the clutch, and you're only using the brakes. Now, brakes are cheap. Clutches and transmissions are not cheap. I personally do that myself in standard transmissions because I'm a cheap guy. Brakes cost practically nothing. So, I can get good brake pads for $25. And these days, even the rotors, you can get decent ones for $30, $35. So since they're so cheap, why not? But if you're in a hurry to stop, then you want safety. Then you want to use the transmission, the clutch, and the brakes to stop. I mean, if you really have to stop in a hurry, you don't even push the clutch in. Just slam on the brake with the car in gear. The engine will stall out and everything, but it'll stop a lot faster if it's an emergency situation. But in normal driving, put in neutral, use the brakes. Brakes are cheap, Next question. Creed Dog 14 says, are C4 Corvettes good? The 4-speed manual ones. Oh, yeah, they've been taken care of. There's nothing like a standard transmission for a long life. If you know how to drive a standard, those things can run forever. Change the fluid every 60, 80,000 miles. It's just splash lubrication. Baby the clutch. They can last a really long time. Now, it's a Corvette, so it's a sports car. And if you buy a used one, who knows what the previous owner did? Generally, guys that drive sport cars, they rag the heck out of the things. So It could be worn out. If you're ever going to buy a used one, always pay a mechanic like me to check it out before you buy it, because you don't know if it's been ragged, it's got a lot of problems. But that said, the standard transmissions are a lot more bulletproof than the automatic transmission. So if you're going to buy a used one, get a standard. It's going to last longer. Next question. Jonah Graff says, hey, Scotty, what are your feelings on buying a used 2008 Volvo C30? I'm looking at one with 106,000 miles. Want to know if they're generally reliable. Okay, it's a 2008, so it's an 11-year-old vehicle, 106,000 miles. Now, as they age, many Volvos become endless money pits. That's just how they are here in the United States. Now, if you live in Sweden, the parts are cheap. They're readily available. Go ahead and buy one there. Here, if you're going to buy an 11-year-old Volvo with no warranty whatsoever, if you get it cheap enough, I've had in-laws in my family buy used Volvos, pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, drive them 5-6 years, and they take care of them. And if they don't have a transmission or an engine problem, they can be reliable cars. You just don't pay much for one that's that old with that kind of mileage on it. Next question. The Jordan Baker fan says, are throttle body injected engine always fussy until they warm up? Well, they weren't when they were new. Now, if you're talking about a throttle body injection system, geez, you're talking about 20 to 30-year-old cars now. And a lot of old cars are fussy until they're warmed up. When they were brand new, they were well designed that when you started it up, the engine would spray extra fuel in to enrich the mixture until they warmed up and then go back to normal when it's in a closed loop fuel injection system. But of course now, they're really old cars, so they generally will be fussy about running right until they're warmed up. But if you want, and you have an old one like that, most of them only had 2 fuel injectors, some only had 1. Put new fuel injectors in them. They don't cost that much. And they just unscrew new ones, go over the new seals, and you bolt them back together. Anybody can do it themselves. It's a backyard mechanic dream job. It's real easy to do. So you might put new fuel injectors and find that it'll run a lot better then, because they are pretty old now. Next question is Caden Sanford. Scotty, what do you think about BMW's M3 3.2-liter straight-six engine? Well, those were pretty bulletproof engines. BMW always made good engines. It was the electronics in the later days that made them nonsense cars. Now, when I was a young mechanic in the 60s, BMW, in the United States at least, sold 4-cylinder cars. And they lasted a long time. They were pretty bulletproof. They were strong little cars. But then they became more yuppie and rich people's cars. And they started making 6s and 8s and even V12 engines. The late model Rolls Royces with V12s, those were BMW V12 engines in those things. The 6-cylinder engines, very strong, well-built engines that could last a really long time. There was nothing wrong with those engines. It was the rest of the cars, as they got more complex and more plastic involved in them, that had problems, not the engines themselves. Next question. Juan Vasquez says, Scotty, I'm looking to buy a used car, but it's from a rental company, Hertz to be exactly. What do you think about that? Thanks. Okay, put on your thinking cap. I rent cars all the time. I travel all over the world checking out cars and making videos and stuff. So I rent a lot of cars. Well, when I rent a car, what do? I beat the heck out of it because it's a rental car, you know. Sometimes you get curbs, all kinds of things can happen with a rental car. Do you really want to buy a car that a bunch of people like me drove all over the place? Not that smart of an idea. I really wouldn't want to buy one. And you don't get that great of a deal either, because they just say, oh, it's a 2-year-old car, here's what it's worth. And when they sell them used, they don't even let you barter. You can't say, I'll pay you less. They'll say, no, this is the price that we get, take it or leave it. I personally would not buy one, especially when you consider how are they maintained. Generally, they're like pimply-faced teenage kids that might change the oil a little once in a while in the back room, but they really don't do that much to them. I'm not personally a fan. And I've had customers buy them, and some of them had okay luck, but some of them had really bad luck too. So, I'd pass on buying a rental car myself. Next question. Mr. Blueberry 34 says I got a 95 F-150 with a 5-liter V8 engine. When I drive uphill, the truck kind of struggles even when I floor. What could be the problem? I'm thinking it's the mass airflow sensor. Well, it could be a lot of things. The first thing, just change the fuel filter. Because if you got low fuel pressure, it'll do the same thing. If that fixes it, great. If not, yeah, you might have a mechanic like me put on a scan tool, takes 5 minutes, and drive it hard and see what the data on the mass air fuel is. And if it's bad data, put another one in. Or if you just want to guess yourself, you can get them from AutoZone for less than $100 usually. Give that a try. Now, if it's not that, it could be the fuel pump. You want to pressure test the fuel pump because on that, you got to drop the fuel tank. It's a real pain in the butt. And you want to use an OEM factory pump on those. You don't want one of these cheap aftermarket ones. So it's an expensive proposition, and you would want to have the fuel pump pressure tested rather than just guess on something like that because it's such an expensive fix. Next question. Jobs 11 says, Scotty, my 2001 Jag X-Types engine light comes on for the upstream lambda center. Replacing the lambda doesn't stop the code from reappearing. Any ideas? Okay, here's the thing about those oxygen sensors. They are part of a very complex computer-run system that measures the residual oxygen in your exhaust, then sends feedback to the computer, and then the computer pulses the fuel injectors to try to make for the perfect stoichiometric air-fuel ratio. That's 14.7 parts air to 1 part fuel. So it's a very complicated system. You change the sensor. If you used an OEM factory one and it's still stuck on, it could be the wiring from the sensor to the computer. It could be the computer. The driver circuits are going down. It could be an air leak on the intake. It could be a problem in the fuel injectors. There are all kinds of problems. You tried the obvious thing. And if you used an OEM factory sensor, you did what you could do. Now you're better off finding a guy like me. It's got a dealer level scan tool. We hook them up. We drive them for 10 minutes. Then we analyze the live and mode 6 data that's on it and give you our opinion on what could possibly be wrong. That's what you'd want to do next, really, rather than just guess. Next question. Saf Film says, hey, Scotty, I got a 99 V6 Firebird. Fuel gauge doesn't work. It gets stuck on full when I start up, and if the car idling in a park, it'll drop to empty. What should I do? Okay, well, the most common thing is the sending unit. Inside the gas tank, there's a float. Goes up and down, goes to a little rheostat, goes up and down, then goes to the gauge and makes it move. Since yours is jumping around, maybe you're lucky and it's just a loose wire, especially on the top of the gas tank. You want to check that first. But if it's not that, odds are it's the sending unit. And unfortunately, on that horrible American design, you got to drop the whole stinking gas tank to get to it. It's not like a Toyota or a German car where they got an access panel either under the hood or in the trunk or under the back seat. We just take that out and then there's like 7, 8 screws, take them off, pop it off, change the sending unit. On that, you got to drop the whole gas tank to change it. It's pretty much a pain in the butt. Next question. Thomas Van Driel says, Scotty, I was looking for a first car. I came upon a Saab 900 Turbo. Are those engines reliable and they okay with around 200,000 miles? Because I don't want to spend a fortune for repairs. Okay, it's a Saab $900 Turbo. The company went bankrupt years ago because their cars cost so much money to repair. And that's a turbo, which makes it even more expensive to repair. Now, if you live in Sweden or in Europe, there's a lot of old ones lying around in junkyards and a lot of parts where you can get parts fixed cheaply. I know guys in Sweden that have them and they love them. They swear by them. In the United States, you'd be playing with fire buying that car used with that kind of mileage on it. Anything could go wrong and you're going to throw your money. For a first car, that's not that smart choice, really. Unless you're in Sweden and you know some honest Swedish mechanics. Next question. B. Castro says, hey, Scotty, I got a question about the Ford era Jaguar. Are they any good? Notice Ford doesn't own them anymore. That kind of tells you the truth. Those are some of the worst cars ever made. They had the one that was pretty much a rebadged Ford with the 6-cylinder engine in it. They were one of the biggest piles of junk that Jaguar ever put out. I had customers that bought them, and I said, "Why'd you buy that car?" And they'd say, "Yeah, I just wanted a Jaguar." And I said, "Well, you ever buy another one?" "No, it was the biggest pile of junk I ever had." Now, you can get them dirt cheap. I can buy them all day long for $1,000, $1,500. I mean, if they run and they shift and they go okay, you're not going to lose that much if something big goes on. You can say, "Oh, look, I got a Jaguar." But don't ever think they're going to be reliable. They were the most unreliable piles of junk that they ever put out. Next question. DLM says, "Hey, Scotty, what are your thoughts on CVT transmissions for towing?" Don't. CVT transmissions are made to get the best gas mileage you can possibly get, and they are more efficient. But they're carefully designed to pull the vehicle. That's it. They're not designed for pulling the vehicle and towing something else too. You are flirting with disaster if you think you're going to buy a CVT transmission and start towing heavy weights with them. That would just be a mistake. You don't want to get one of those if you're going to be towing. Basically, if you're really going to be towing anything all the time, you're better with a standard transmission anyways. But the CVT transmissions, don't think about buying one and start towing things. They're just not made for that. Next question. Novel the 7 says, "Scotty, I'm planning on buying an Infiniti FX35. Is it a good choice?" Okay, if you like the way they drive and how they handle, and you're buying a new one, and you don't mind spending that kind of money, go right ahead. Now, my advice with those is never buy an old used one with a lot of miles, because as they age, Infinitis can become endless money pits. Their transmissions, their electronics, their air conditioning systems are notorious for breaking down. But if you buy a brand new one and you don't mind spending that kind of money, you like driving it, go right ahead. Just realize that you're going to sell that thing. If you're the type of guy that gets another car every 6 years or 8 years, you're going to lose your shirt when you sell it, because the resale value plummets as they age. But if you don't mind paying that kind of money and you like the way they drive, go right ahead. Your money. Next question. Ruben Candle says, "I got a 2002 Volvo V70. Can I put a supercharger on it?" Of course, you can do whatever you want. I wouldn't advise it unless you're going to rebuild the engine too. A supercharger does one thing. It rams air into the engine. And by ramming extra air into the engine, you get more horsepower. But ramming more air into the engine is the same thing as increasing the compression ratio of the engine. So if you have a stock, worn car like that, that's what, 17 years old, and you're increasing the compression ratio of the engine's going to wear out faster. I mean, you can do it. It's totally doable, but you're going to wear the engine out a lot faster doing something like that. Guys that do it, generally, they will rebuild the engine first. Then they'll put a supercharger. Or if you don't care, put the supercharger, and then when it blows up, then rebuild the engine. Next question. Kyle Priest says, "What's your opinion on a Toyota truck?" Well, for the money, they probably make the best trucks in the world. Little ones, big ones, just depends on what kind of a truck you want. Now, if you're going to do a lot of heavy towing, a lot of heavy hauling, then I wouldn't buy a Toyota truck. I'd buy a Ford diesel truck, because diesels are made for towing big, heavy stuff all the time, carrying a lot of weight. But if you want a good truck that's going to last a long time, and you're not carrying tons and tons and tons of stuff, you can either get a Tacoma or you can get a Tundra if you want something that's bigger. Now, you're going to pay a lot more for one because they're really well made, but as the saying says, you get what you pay for if you use your noggin. Sometimes you'll get ripped off, but if you use your noggin, you're going to get what you pay for. Next question. Rumblebee Games /News says, "Scotty, are the older Ram trucks with the straight 6 Cummins 5.9 engines any good? Trucks before 1998.5, what I'm looking to get." Well, actually, they can be. That was long before Fiat bought them. Those Cummins engines were great engines. Chrysler didn't make them. Cummins did. I've had customers of them that love those cars. Those trucks. They lasted a long time, and their transmissions are made by Allison. Chrysler didn't make the transmission. Allison did. They make good truck transmissions. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. That said, you're talking about an old one. Hey, if it's 20 years old, you still want to get a guy like me to check it out before you buy it, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong with diesel vehicles. That you need a guy with a dealer level scan tool to road test, to do a few compression tests on the engine, to tell you, is the engine still good, is the transmission good, and what kind of shape it's in. You just want to go buy one sight on scene and then just plot down your money. You want it checked out, because a lot of things can wear out when they're that old, of course. Next question. Teddy says, Scotty, I have a 1.4 turbo 2014 Chevy Cruze manual, 46,000 miles. Should I trade and get something new because the Chevy's reliable, or is it reliable now? Well, you only got 46,000 miles. And you were smart. You got a standard transmission. Those had the worst automatic transmission Chevy ever put out. I got a customer who's on his third one already, and he got them under warranty. But he says as soon as it's out of warranty and it goes out again, he's just going to get rid of the car. But you got it. You might as well drive it around, because its resale value is nothing. And you never know. You don't have that many miles on it. It's a standard transmission. It might last a really long time. What the heck? Next question. Adam, of course, says, Scotty, in your professional opinion, should I put a 2.5-inch leveling kit on a Ford F-150, or should I keep it factory? I don't haul anything ever. Keep it factory. Keep it factory. It was designed that way. A leveling kit, that's just for show. It's stupid on a truck. The truck's designed the way that it is. Leave it alone. Once you start messing with that suspension, it messes with the drivetrain, it messes with the handling. That truck, for what it is pretty well designed. And if you're not hauling a bunch of stuff around, hey, leave it the way it is. It's going to run the best it possibly can, the way that it's set up. And you don't want to start messing with the geometric angles of the way the thing's designed. It would be kind of foolhardy to do something like that. Next question. Van McGee says, is a 1994 Chevy G20 van a good conversion van? Well, back in 94, Chevy was making better vehicles, yes. I'm not a fan of GM these days, but back then, those are decent vans. I got customers with them that, especially if they got the V8 350s in them, they could run a really long time. Now, they're gas hogs. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but they're well made and they could last a long time. It's a 94. So what are we talking? 25-year-old vehicle. It's old. So you'd want to check out before you bought it. Or if you get it for practically nothing, fix it up and drive it around. I mean, they were much better made in those days than they are today. There's no arguing that. Next question. Kenneth Meyer says, Scotty, what's your take on the Nissan Versa Note? Well, it's interesting technology. There's no arguing that. I am not a fan of Nissan. Ever since, I guess it was around the year 2000, Peugeot and Nissan merged. And Nissan's been on the verge of bankruptcy for ages. Ford was going to buy them, but then when their stock went down ages ago, they gave up with the idea of buying Nissan. So I'm not really a fan of their stuff. It doesn't hold up over time. They put some technology into them, yes, but their automatic transmissions they've had problems with, air conditioning systems, engines, blown head gasket. I am not a fan of any of their products. I personally would not buy any. Now, I've rented them to see how they drove when I go places, and they can be okay to drive around. I've driven Notes when I rented cars, and they were okay, but, they're kind of clunky little cars. They don't ride all that well. I'm not a fan of them. Next question. Shingo Karishma 1997 says, Scotty, I'm thinking about buying a 2016 to 18 Ford Focus RX later as a weekend driver. They're well built, any problems to look for other than head gasket failures? Okay, those are pretty well built cars. Just realize, don't pay that much for it because they're not going to be making them anymore. So when they stop making cars, the value goes down unless they're collector's items, and those aren't by any stretch collector's items. It's not like a Gullwing Mercedes where it's going to be worth millions one day. They're never going to be collector's items. So if you get one cheap enough, they ride nice, and you want a weekend car, they do ride quite well. That's when Ford took a lot of, when they owned part of Volvo, they took a lot of that technology from Volvo, so they ride really well. So there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't pay too much for it. Next question. Martin the Panda says, "Hey Scotty, what do you think of Opel?" Well, you might know what I say about German cars, but Opel was the first car I owned as a kid. I paid $550, and I drove the heck out of that thing for 6 years, and I sold it for $500 when I was done. Opel's kind of like Ford Model T. They made some of the early cars in Germany. They made cars in Germany, V8s and V12s, stuff that they never sold over here. I personally wouldn't buy one any day in the United States. It's very hard to get parts.